Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Silence fell upon the battlefield. The maddened chaos that had raged across the ruined city ceased, as though time itself held its breath. The wind whispered over shattered buildings and broken steel. Even the cries of pain and the mechanical whirring of Darkseid's war machines faded to nothing. All eyes turned to the trembling shadows. The shadow monsters and knights. The shadows of broken walls. The shadows of corpses, of fallen titans, of heroes and villains alike. They all shook. So did the shadows under the feet of Darkseid's soldiers, his soulless, reanimated warriors, and paradooms alike. They began to move unnaturally, shivering like leaves in a hurricane. Even the other invaders, those monsters born from the fires of apocalypse, paused. Fear crept into them, inexplicably, irrationally. Berzu's terrified words rang in everyone's ears. "My king is furious." Then a rip in reality split open in front of Ace and Courtney, glowing with ominous, swirling purple. From it, two figures emerged. Ashborne stepped through first. His mere presence was a weight that pressed against the world. Jet black eyes, glowing purple pupils. No expression, no kindness, no humanity, just wrath restrained behind unfathomable control. Beside him stood Amazo, his frame transforming into his golden 3-meter form, glaring forward with uncontained fury. Ace, still on her knees, blood and tears streaming down her face, looked up. "Grandpa Rex, he died to protect me." Ashbourne's gaze did not soften. "I know." Amazo's hands clenched, but Ashborne raised his own, still and calm. "Not this time," he said. His eyes shifted toward Galatea's distant figure, broken and mourning. He began walking, step after step over the wreckage of what was once his home. His eyes scanned the aftermath, the shattered remains of Shadow Corp Tower, the bodies of Jinx and Blue Beetle lying cold and still, the other titans injured and scattered, Kydwykid's lifeless form near the sobbing Bill, Mammoth and Gizmo. Shops he visited, streets he once walked with friends, laughter, now echoes lost in smoke. People he knew in person, others he knew about, civilians, villains, and heroes. His home was filled with destruction and death. Ashbourne's gaze rose slowly and locked onto Darkseid. For the first time in this life, Ashborne felt pure hatred. His fury was not fiery, but cold, absolute. Darkseid narrowed his glowing eyes. "So, you are the controller of these black creatures, an interesting power. Swear loyalty to me, and I shall spare you and a few of your choice." Ashborne stopped walking. His voice, quiet but sharp as a blade, echoed through the broken city. "Spare me, you, a puny god. Think you can spare me." A pulse of shadow erupted from beneath his feet. It spread like a wave in every direction. From it, thousands of shadows rose. Menacing, imposing, yet they were different from before. Their energy, once a swirling mix of black and blue, now shimmered with violent purple. Biru Igris, the entire existing army, shifted, darkened, stronger, glowing purple, faster. Now they were wrath incarnate. And they moved. Like the opening of a dam, the shadow army surged forward. What had been a close match became a massacre. Ikrias tore through Steppenwolf and the Furies as if they were made of paper. Doomsday crushed Grail and Dark Supergirl beneath his heel. Biru collided with Darkseid again, and this time the tide had turned. Each strike Biru landed forced the new god back, his speed, his strength now equal, if not greater. Darkseid snarled, body showing signs of damage for the first time. "Enough!" A wave of Omega energy blasted Biru back. "You think this is the limit of my army?" In response, boom tubes tore through the sky. Hundreds of them. Tens of thousands of paradooms emerged, their snarls echoing. Behind them, hundreds of thousands of paradooms screeched into the atmosphere, descending like locusts. The heroes gasped. Even Superman's expression fell into despair. "That's impossible." But Ashborne stood unmoved. His voice was ice. "No army in existence can rival mine." And with that, the city itself changed. Rivers of shadows poured outward like a living sea. The ground twisted and cracked as hundreds of thousands of shadow soldiers emerged. Not just humanoid ones, giants as tall as skyscrapers rose. Drakes, beasts, monstrosities from forgotten nightmares, every kind of creature spilled out, filling the ruins. And it wasn't over. Over the sea, new purple gates opened, larger ones. From one of them stepped a titanic being, dwarfing even the tallest buildings. The demon lord Trigon, dragons of unimaginable size, soared out behind them, their roars shaking the skies. Then the sky changed. An enormous purple gate opened above them all, stretching to every visible edge of the world, and from it they descended. Millions. An endless tide of shadows, warriors of every kind, of every race, creatures that seemed from myths, soldiers from different worlds, beings unlike anything this multiverse had ever seen. They fell from the heavens like stars going to war. The battlefield stood frozen. Even Darkseid himself stared at the sky for the first time, truly stunned. Ashborne's voice rang calmly across the battlefield. Earth is too small to host my whole army, but this won't change the outcome. From the rivers of shadows, millions of glowing purple eyes stared directly at Darkseid, but didn't raise. They waited for their king's command. And for the first time, the defenders of Earth realized the true horror of Ashborne's power. Ashborne's voice cut through the thick air like divine decree. Eradicate them and bring me that puny god on his knees. It was not just a command, it was judgment. The silence of awe shattered into a cacophony of screams, roars, and devastation. The heroes of Earth, those still standing, watched as the tide turned from overwhelming to apocalyptic. Darkseid's army, once an unstoppable force, was now prey. From the skies, the shadows rained destruction. Spears made of solid purple energy fell in showers, piercing through paradooms and parademons with surgical precision. Where the dragon shadows flew, their roars alone disintegrated the creatures of apocalypse. The world trembled. Storms formed from the sheer velocity of their wings. The ground below was no safer. Thousands of humanoid shadow warriors, clad in armor sculpted from the essence of death, shot through the air, carving paradooms as if they were paper. Amidst the massacre, Darkseid stood. But he was no longer the fearsome conqueror towering above the battlefield. Before him stood a knight, a colossal one, twice his height, clad in obsidian armor crackling with purple energy. No name was spoken, it did not need one. This was the hand of the Shadow King. Darkseid's eyes blazed crimson, and the Omega beams fired. They twisted mid-air, impossible to dodge, unstoppable. They struck the knight full force, and fizzled. The knight shrugged, took a step forward, and grabbed Darkseid by the arm. Then came the punches. Each blow shook the ground like an earthquake. With each strike, the god of apocalypse groaned, not in rage but in pain. His armor cracked, his face bled. Finally, the knight seized Darkseid by the back of the neck, dragging him across the field like a broken trophy. The corpses of his army lay shattered around him. The cries of dying parademons still echoed. He was thrown before Ashborne, forced to his knees. Ashborne stared down at him. His voice was low, controlled. "Where is your hubris now, God?" Darkseid looked up, bruised and bleeding, yet unbroken in pride. "You think you've won?" he hissed. "I am a god. Even if you kill me now, I will return. I will continue what I started." Ashborne's eyes narrowed. "I know, but you won't come back." His voice was still, terrifying. "I will make sure your name is forgotten. No one will know who Darkseid was when I am done." Darkseid sneered through blood. "You think you can end a god?" Ashborne didn't answer him. Instead, his gaze flicked to the towering knight. "Go, the rest of you as well, to Apocalypse. Destroy it. Leave no living creature, not one." The knight nodded and dissolved into shadow. One by one, the titanic beasts, dragons, humanoid soldiers, and monsters turned into pure darkness, swirling together into a vortex. They rose, a black tower breaching the sky until a massive gate appeared high in the sky. The shadow tower entered the gate like an arrow of doom. Ashborne's voice echoed behind him. "Your name will be eradicated from this world. No one will remember you." Darkseid forced himself to stand, wobbling, blood dripping from his wounds. He turned and looked around. In less than 5 minutes, his army had been reduced to a few thousands. He clenched his jaw, his eyes burned red again. "You just sent your entire army away," he growled. "That was your mistake." Nearby, several heroes were still wounded and exhausted, tensed. Even they feared this might be a misstep. Darkseid was no common foe. He was a monster. Even a wounded god could level Earth. Ashborne, calm as ever, turned slightly toward him. "They are not needed." His voice dipped into the abyss. "You brought me enough." Then he spoke a single word, "Arise," and the world changed. From every corner of the battlefield, corpses stirred. The dead, the mutilated, the crushed, the torn, rose again. But not as themselves, as shadows. Darkseid's eyes widened, not in fury, but in shock as he watched hundreds of thousands of parademons and paradooms rise again, now bearing purple glowing eyes and obsidian skin. He watched as Steppenwolf rose again, his body a dark echo of the general he once was. The Furies, even the heroes he mutilated and controlled, once rose again. His own forces, now loyal to someone else. The heroes could hardly breathe. Superman turned, watching as fallen Green Lanterns rose once more, not as protectors, but as part of the ever-growing army of the darkness. Diana's hands trembled as she watched hundreds of fallen Amazonians rise from the blood-soaked earth, no longer bearing the spark of Themyscira in their eyes. Ashbourne's army had grown again, not just in strength, but in meaning. These were the dead, and the dead belonged to him. A chilling realization spread like wildfire through the remaining defenders and invaders. The Shadow Army was built from death, from all deaths. And now the world saw how endless it truly was. Superman's fists clenched as he looked around, unease blooming in his heart. His mind racing. How many has he killed to build that army? Darkseid, no longer looking angry, but simply desperate, took a single step back as thousands of paradooms surrounded him. Darkseid clenched his jaw, blood dripping from a split lip, bones groaning beneath cracked skin as he looked around at the shadows of his army staring at him, waiting to rip him apart. His godly essence queer with rage, but not just at his injuries. At humiliation, his army was gone. His world is being attacked. His forces turned to dust and now walked as shadows. But it was this man, this thing before him, that broke his pride. He locked eyes with Ashborne, standing among the ruin, shadows behind him like an endless tide. "They called you their king," Darkseid spat. "Are you going to hide behind them instead of fighting?" Ashborne did not flinch. His face, carved from the stillness of death, remained unchanged. "Do you think your provocation will work?" he said quietly. Ashborne took a step forward, his presence suffocating. "I have a better question," he said, voice cold. "Do you think fighting me is better?" Darkseid didn't respond. The answer was irrelevant. His pride had decided. He growled and surged forward. Fists clenched, Omega energy crackling across his form. Ashborne raised a single finger. "You puny god should be kneeling for mercy." A pulse erupted. Ruler's authority. Darkseid's knees slammed into the broken earth. The god roared, trying to rise. Muscles flexed. Body trembled, but he couldn't stand. His hands clawed at the ground as his fury boiled. His eyes blazed glowing crimson as the Omega beams charged. Ashborne casually pointed downward. Darkseid's face smashed into the dirt. "You should be kissing the ground for mercy," Ashborne said, icily. "Yet you, lowly thing, had the audacity to think you could fight me." With a snarl, Darkseid forced his head up, breaking free of the pressure. He let loose the Omega beam with a thunderous roar, the deadly twin rays spiraling toward Ashborne like divine retribution. Ashborne didn't move. He simply looked at the incoming beam. And then crack. A fist collided with Darkseid's jaw, Ashborne's, as he appeared beside him in the blink of an eye. The Omega beam fizzled as Darkseid flew backward like a broken meteor. Ashborne began to walk, slow and deliberate. Darkseid roared again and charged. But it was no longer a fight. It was a beatdown. Ashborne didn't dodge. He didn't defend. He hit, over and over again. Brutal, merciless. Every strike echoed like a thunderclap. When Darkseid tried to swing, Ashborne vanished, only to appear behind him, in front of him, above him, each time with a strike that shattered bone, burst muscle, or ripped armor. Darkseid's confusion grew. He couldn't see him, couldn't track him. Ashborne tilted his head. "Do you know what is the fastest thing in existence, puny god?" he asked. "Some might say light." He caught Darkseid's wrist mid-punch. "But the answer is darkness." Ashborne's voice chilled the world. "Wherever you go, wherever light travels, darkness is already there waiting." With an inhuman power, Ashborne twisted and punched with all his might, Darkseid's body shattered through buildings like a comet, disappearing in the distance. In Ashborne's hand remained the god's severed arm, torn between the punch's force and Ashborne grip. The world fell silent. Heroes and villains alike stared, unable to believe it. The god of apocalypse was being crushed. Then a blur from the side, a streak of speed and shadow hurtled toward Ashborne. Dark Supergirl, her body, bloodied and torn from battle, streaked across the field, loyal even in the face of annihilation. Ashborne didn't look at her. He simply punched to the side. His hand pierced her skull with ease. Bone cracked, blood sprayed, and the woman body dropped lifeless at his feet. Darkseid stood in the ruins of his own pride, his body a ruin, blood dripping from his mouth and chest, his arm gone, but his fury remained. With a final scream, he prepared the Omega Beam again, when a spark of heat struck him in the chest. He stumbled. Looking up, he saw the source. His loyal Supergirl, now Shadow. Her corpse had shifted and stood silently beside her new master. The soldier of the dead. Darkseid's face fell into horror, and for the first time in eternity, he felt alone in the face of this ever-expanding army. Kara gasped, a ragged breath escaping her lips as her eyes fluttered open. She bolted upright with a start, disoriented. Her limbs trembled, still feeling the phantom pain of a blow that had nearly killed her. What happened?" she rasped. Superman, kneeling beside her, looked grim. "You nearly died," he said solemnly, then cast a glance at the figure beside her. "But that shadow thing saved you." Kara turned her head. A tall, silent shadow loomed beside her, motionless, watching. "Thanks," Kara said softly. The shadow didn't respond. She blinked, confused, and slowly stood. "What did I miss?" A voice replied from nearby. "A lot," said Galatea. Kara turned, startled. Galatea stood tall and whole, her wounds healed as if they'd never existed. Kara followed her gaze, then froze. In the distance, Ashborne. Before him stood Darkseid, bloodied and broken, and around them hundreds of shadows, once paradooms, now loyal to a new master. "What is going on?" Kara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Flash, who had joined them moments earlier, spoke with a half-wry, half-terrified tone. "You missed a lot." Ashborne Black came back, and when full death got on Apocalypse forces, genocidal mania included. Kara turned her eyes back toward Ashborne. She saw it all, the way he walked like strength incarnate. She heard every word he spoke, the way he shattered Darkseid's pride. The moment her dark counterpart charged to help, only to be struck down without Ashborne even looking. The punch, the piercing hand, the collapse of Dark Supergirl's body, Kara flinched. But then she watched the shadow of her counterpart rise from the corpse, stand beside Ashborne. Her stomach turned to ice. "How?" she whispered. Superman's voice was grave, his eyes hard with dread. "He commands the dead," he said. "Every shadow you see, every single one of them came from a corpse. They are bound to him, utterly loyal." Kara's lips parted in horror. Her gaze drifted over the battlefield. So many shadows, so many lives ended. And now, in his service, she finally understood. Ashborne wasn't just powerful. He was terrifying beyond anything she had ever known. The world watched in silence as Ashborne walked slowly toward the broken god who had once ruled with absolute fear. "I truly can't fathom," he said, voice cold. "What made you think fighting me was a good idea?" With a final desperate cry, Darkseid unleashed the Omega Beam, brighter and stronger than ever before. A direct blast to Ashborne's chest, a beam strong enough to annihilate stars. The impact triggered an eruption of a wildfire of energy, red and golden, engulfing Ashborne in a tempest of destruction. But from within the fire, Ashborne walked, unharmed, unbothered. "You couldn't match my soldiers," his voice echoed through the flames. "You were beaten by them, but still, you wanted to take me on." The red storm burst apart as darkness erupted, swallowing the Omega Beam. A torrent of black and purple flame surged forward, devouring everything in its path. Darkseid staggered back, dread consuming him as he asked, "What are you?" The world began to change. The sky blackened into a void deeper than night. Streets turned pitch black. Rubble, buildings, even light itself, vanished into endless darkness. All colors were lost. The world became monochrome death. And in that void, Only one light remained, a towering torrent of purple fire roaring where Ashborne stood. Then came his voice, but not as before. Now it was inhuman. "I brought down rulers," he declared, "monarchs, the Itarim alike." His tone rumbled like a god's damnation. "And you, a mere god, think can take me on?" Every syllable shook the souls of the living. From within the inferno walked a giant 5 meters tall. His black armor pulsed with purple energy. A long cloak of darkness trailed behind him. His helmet was ancient and cruel, eyes glowing like twin stars of apocalypse. Atop the helm burned a crown of purple flame. With a single step forward, the entire world shook. Silence. Every living creature across the world fell into stillness. Their thoughts fled, their bodies refused to move. Fear gripped them, not just fear of death, but of something far worse. This was judgment. This was inevitable. The incarnation of death and darkness had come. Even Darkseid, the god of tyranny, stood frozen. This wasn't a man, this wasn't a king. This was the end of all things. "I am the first of the rulers, the ruler of death. I am the last of the monarchs, the shadow monarch." Ashborne took a slow, deliberate step forward. His towering, armored form loomed over Darkseid, whose battered body trembled from the unrelenting. Ashborne took a slow, deliberate step forward. His towering, armored form loomed over Darkseid, whose battered body trembled from the unrelenting pressure of Ashborne's presence. Then, without ceremony, Ashborne extended his hand and plunged it straight through Darkseid's chest. The impact was brutal and effortless, as if tearing through air. Ashborne's arm protruded from the other side of the god's torso, lifting him off the ground like a rag doll. Darkseid's eyes widened in disbelief and agony. "You think you are safe because of this avatar?" Ashborne's voice was low, cold, and absolute. "You think I cannot reach you because your real self resides in the god sphere?" Darkseid screamed, but Ashborne was unmoved, his tone filled with cruelty. "I will rip through every dimension you exist in," he said. "Every fragment of knowledge regarding you will be erased. Every creature that dares speak your name will be destroyed. Even the other gods will not be spared." Darkseid's avatar convulsed as his essence was forcibly torn apart. The Omega Force within him shrieking in defiance, but Ashborne was already drawing closer, his burning eyes piercing into what remained of the tyrants. "And I will erase you from the history of every world," Ashborne declared. "Then I will come to the god sphere to end you. No gods will save you. No apostles will be able to stop me. Even if the Itarim of this multiverse steps in, it still won't be enough." Darkseid's screams choked into silence as the avatar's body disintegrated into black ashes, swept away by the windless void. A sudden ripple tore through the air behind Ashborne. A new gate opened, this one swirling red and glowing with primal chaos. From it stepped a tall man clad in black armor, his long red hair flowing like blood on fire. His grin was wild, his aura exuding destruction. "You didn't call me for years," he said with a smirk. "I thought you forgot me in your endless army." Ashborne turned slowly. "Antares," he said, "you are the monarch of destruction. I will allow you this time to do what you like. Scout the multiverse for the tyranny god, Darkseid, and erase all traces of his existence. Then destroy his true self in the god sphere." Antares laughed, eyes glowing with murderous joy. "The naive one who preached peace to the bitter end now asks me to kill and destroy on such a scale. What did that lowly thing do to earn such wrath?" Ashborne's gaze sharpened. "Do you want to die for good?" Antares raised his hands in surrender. All right, I was just curious. Leave it to me. Tens of billions will die in the name of your cause." He turned to the gate, laughing maniacally. "I've missed this." Then he vanished into the swirling red gate, leaving a faint trail of destruction behind him. The world was silent. No wind, no breath, no movement, until Amazo stepped forward, his voice the first to break the tension. "Father, is it wise to give the most deranged and dangerous of the monarchs a free rein?" Ashborne didn't turn. "It doesn't matter as long as he gets the job done." Then the crushing darkness that had swallowed the planet began to recede. Color returned to the land. The sky softened from black to blue-gray. Buildings, ground, and cities regained their textures, though the scars of war remained. But no one moved. No one dared. Ashborne in his human form stood there, a god among corpses and shadows, the embodiment of death incarnate. Amazo stepped closer, analyzing the Earth's core with his internal systems. He blinked. My scanners show the Earth's core is damaged significantly, he said. At this rate, Earth will die in a year at most. Ashborne stood still, silent as stone. His blazing purple eyes regarded Amazo, who was reviewing the deep readings of Earth's failing core. Fixing the core with normal means is impossible, Amazo said, voice steady but weighted. There's too much internal collapse. The planet cannot be fixed at this stage. Ashborne sighed. Then, with the slowness of finality, he raised his hand. Darkness wrapped around it in tendrils of shadow pulsing with energy. When the darkness dispersed, a cup shimmered in his palm. A glowing vessel of impossible design, forged by the oldest being Ashborne had known. Without a word, Ashborne tilted the cup. A single drop of golden liquid fell. The moment it touched the ruined earth, a radiant explosion of light surged outward. The golden light swept across the land like a tidal wave, enveloping everything, land, sea, and sky. As far as the eye could see, everything was bathed in brilliance. Survivors across the planet shielded their eyes from the intensity, gasping in awe and fear alike. Then, as quickly as it had arrived, the light began to recede. When it cleared, the world had changed. The battlefield was gone. The ruins had vanished. The city stood whole again, buildings gleaming, streets repaired, even the smallest cracks sealed. It was as if the war had never happened. Survivors blinked and looked around in wonder. Homes restored. Life returned. Amazo scanned the Earth's core once more. His eyes flickered, then refocused. The planet has been restored to its original state, he announced. Everything is back to normal. A small figure stepped forward. Ice. Her eyes were red with tears, her voice soft, trembling. Dad, can't you revive Grandpa Rex? Ashborne looked down at her. His expression softened just slightly. Ashborne said quietly, if I wanted to bring him back, I would have to change fate. That would trigger a crisis, one that would destroy everything. The world would be reset. Everyone would vanish. That's the law set by this world's iterum, and everything is set on stone. Only the owner can change it. Ace's lips quivered, her tears returned. She said nothing more, just buried her face into her hands and cried. Ashborne turned to Amazo. Take her home, he said. Stay beside her. Amazo nodded once and gently took Ace's hand. With a shimmer of light, the two disappeared into the shadows, bound for safety. Ashborne remained alone for a moment. Then his gaze shifted to Galatea and the battered members of the Justice League nearby. Without a word, Ashborne teleported. In the blink of an eye, he appeared before them. No one spoke. Not even Superman. They stared at him, not with pride or hope, but with fear. The kind that settled into the bones. The kind that gods evoked when they walked among mortals. Galatea finally broke the silence. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking. In my arrogance, I allowed Rex to come here with us. It's my fault. All of it. Ashborne looked at her. If he was not there, he said, Ace would have gone instead. Someone would have died regardless of your choice. I did not leave enough soldiers behind. That is on me. Galatea looked down, grief-stricken. Ashborne's gaze shifted to Superman. I will release your colleagues, he said, and all those who fought to defend Earth from my shadow army. But you and the rest of your league will prepare a funeral for the fallen. Superman nodded silently, jaw clenched, no words, no argument. Ashborne's shadow began to swirl and rise, enveloping Galatea in a quiet shroud of darkness. As the shadow consumed them both, his final words echoed in the silence. He and Galatea appeared together in the center of the living room, where Ace and Amazo already sat. The silence in the room was crushing. The only sound came from Ace, who sat curled up on the couch, his body trembling with quiet sobs. Tears streaked down his cheeks. When he saw them, he looked up with red-rimmed eyes and a cracked voice. It was my fault, Ace whispered. He died to save me. Ashborne didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and placed a firm hand on the girl's shoulder. His voice was calm, but heavy with the weight of finality. It is not your fault, he said. It was the result of all of our actions. He paused, glancing at Galatea, who said nothing. Her arms folded tightly as if bracing herself against grief. Uncle Rex chose to protect you. Ashborne continued. T allowed him to tag along. I could have left more than a few thousands of soldiers behind. I could have charged the soldiers' mana to full power. I could have kept an active watch here. But I didn't any of that. I was confident it was not needed, and that it could cause some annoying individuals to come. Amazo stirred from his seat, head low. No, I was the reason why Father left this world for so long in the first place, he said, his voice filled with regret. Ashborne looked at him. There was no accusation, no anger, only acceptance. Darkseid invaded another dimension, he said, and we all made decisions, some small, some great, but every one of them led to this. Ace sniffled and tried to wipe his tears away with his sleeve. But they kept coming. Galatea knelt beside her silently, wrapping one arm gently around her shoulders. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Ashborne moved to a nearby chair and sat down. For a moment he didn't speak. His gaze was distant. But the purple embers beneath his eyes still glowed faintly like dying stars refusing to go out. Then his voice broke the silence. For him, Ashborne said, I will end Darkseid permanently, even if I have to sink this entire multiverse into endless darkness. The words were terrifying in their honesty. No one questioned them. No one flinched. The room accepted them as truth, because deep down, they all knew it was a final judgment. The fire of vengeance may have lit in Ashborne's chest, but in that moment, everyone in the room grieved not as meta-human, clone, or android, but as family. The death of one good old man had left a hole in their hearts that no war or shadow could ever truly fill. The war was over, but its echoes refused to fade. Though Ashborne had restored the Earth to its former state, reversing the material destruction with terrifying ease, the death toll remained untouched. Thousands, civilians, heroes, and even villains lay among the casualties. The city's skies were no longer choked with smoke, but grief lingered in the air, heavy and thick. Streets were lined with hastily constructed memorials. Heroes and civilians worked side by side, lighting candles, preparing funerals. Capes fluttered in silence, not from wind, but from solemn duty. Statues were planned, names engraved on black stone, and not a single hand remained idle. Even the villains, infamous for their selfishness and cruelty, stayed quiet. No jailbreaks, no plots, no crimes. They too had stood on the front lines. They had witnessed the end and somehow felt part of it. Not allies, not enemies, but survivors. They walked the streets in silence, unchallenged by the League, offering no threats in return. A moment of stillness had overtaken even the worst of them. But what overshadowed even the mourning was the man who brought it all to an end. Ashborne, the Shadow Monarch. His arrival, his power, his dominion, all of it left an impression that none could forget. The world had watched him fight Darkseid and win. It shattered illusions the Justice League had held for years. Once they prepared to face gods and titans. Once they believed in unity and strategy to face anything. How they failed to stop Darkseid and how Ashborne's arrival changed everything. They remembered how, not long ago, they considered fighting him, fighting the Shadow Monarch. It felt laughable now, pathetic. Ashborne wasn't just stronger. He was a being beyond anything they knew or understood. His otherworldly form, his words, his presence, it carved into their souls the truth. This wasn't someone they could oppose. Not physically, not ideologically, not even in thought, and perhaps worse than his might was his knowledge. Wherever shadows touched, Ashborne could see. Listen, no. It didn't matter if it was a whisper in the watchtower or a prayer in Atlantis. If it hid in darkness, he was there. That truth sank into their bones. No more private conversations. No more offhanded judgments. Even alone, no one dared speak ill of the Shadow Monarch. He commanded both death and darkness. His army was made of the dead, and they followed him in blind loyalty. Reverence, akin to soulless slaves. Even Trigon, the nightmare demon so many thought unstoppable, stood among Ashborne's ranks, just another soldier. When Raven of the Teen Titans saw her father among the dead, she fell to her knees. Her counterpart from another world screamed in horror. Trigon, their father, who once threatened the world, was gone. His soul belonged to someone else now. Someone far worse. Dr. Fate, though shaken, had been one of the few to speak. His voice trembled as he recalled the red-haired man that came through the red gate. Chaos and destruction personified, he said. That creature shouldn't exist in this realm. He refused to repeat Antare's name aloud, and no one asked him to. Even Wonder Woman, once proud and defiant, had crumbled beneath the truth. Her mother was dead. Ashbourne's shadows would have taken all of the Niskira. She had vowed vengeance, but that vow turned to void. She had seen the transformation, she had felt the fear, as if the concept of death itself stared at her. There was no pride left, only awe and terror in their rawest form. And the knowledge that she lived only because he allowed it. The world had changed. The League had changed. Even the villains had changed. But above all, the balance had shifted. Ashbourne did not speak a word. He did not do anything. He simply existed, and that was enough to keep everyone afraid. Kara sat atop the skeletal remains of a skyscraper, her legs drawn up loosely as she looked over the city. The once familiar skyline was darkened, a reminder of war and power. Below, emergency lights flickered like dying stars, struggling to restore some semblance of normalcy. Yet up here, there was only wind, silence, and her thoughts. Then the wind shifted and a figure landed beside her with a soft thud. Kara turned her head slightly and saw Galatea. Galatea didn't speak immediately. She just stood there, awkward but composed. After a few seconds, she asked, "Can I sit?" Kara narrowed her eyes. "What do you want?" Galatea gave a faint smirk. "I'll take that as a yes," she said, and lowered herself beside Kara, her tone softening. "I wanted to thank you for saving me back there. If not for you, those two unhinged bitches would have killed me." Kara glanced sideways at her. "You came to help me first. I paid you back." Galatea nodded. "Maybe I was disoriented from the pain. Still, I noticed how you blocked them with your body. You nearly died. You didn't have to do that. For a clone." Kara was silent for a long moment. "Finally," she said, "I didn't mean to sacrifice myself for you, but my body moved on its own. I guess I've gotten used to throwing myself in front of people." Galatea stared ahead, then slowly exhaled. "I hated you. Since the day I opened my eyes, I always knew I was a clone, a fake. And you were the real one. I blamed you for everything about my existence. I wanted to prove I was better than you, that I existed, not just as someone's science project. Even when I said I wanted nothing to do with you, she faltered. I still enjoyed seeing you tormented. I enjoyed your misery." Kara's lips tightened, but she didn't interrupt. Galatea lowered her head. "I'm sorry for hurting you, for lying, for making you suffer, because I was jealous." Silence again. Then Kara finally spoke, her voice soft. "I hated you too. For just being there. I hated that they made you. I blamed you because you were the only face I could see and hit." Galatea didn't respond, letting Kara continue. "When I lost to you, I felt angry at you, at myself. I felt worthless. For a moment, I thought maybe I wasn't the real one, and my hate for you grew. I started to feel jealous, too. And when Ashborne chose you to follow him instead of me, it hurt. I told myself he was an idiot, that you tricked him, that he just couldn't see who you really were." Kara looked down, hands clenched on her knees. "I thought you were a scumbag. I couldn't understand what he saw in you." Galatea didn't flinch, though the words clearly hit her. "But then, when Darkseid came," Kara said, her voice quieter now, "you agreed to help. You didn't need to. You and Ace could have run, waited for Ashborne and Amazo to come back. But you didn't. You stayed. You fought with everything you had. And seeing what Ashborne was capable of all along, and you two knew, your stand has more weight than any of us." Kara turned to face her. "I see now. I was wrong." Galatea blinked, her expression caught somewhere between pain and relief. Then slowly she extended a hand. "A new start?" Kara looked at the hand for a moment, then smiled faintly and took it. Galatea grinned. "I've wanted a little sister for a while now." Kara scoffed. "I'm older than you." Galatea chuckled. "I'm older physically." The two sat there side by side, no longer enemies, no longer rivals. Just two versions of a girl who had finally found understanding in the wreckage of their pasts. And maybe a family neither ever thought they'd have. Ashborne sat in the silence of his rebuilt office, but he hadn't come to work. He simply wanted to be alone. War, conflict, power. None of it mattered to him. Not after what the system forced him to endure, after what this world's chaos had taken from him. He thought he could avoid the cycle of bloodshed, enjoy life, even feel something close to peace. But he underestimated the madness of this world, and someone he had grown close to paid the ultimate price. A knock on the tall glass window broke the silence. Ashborne turned slightly, his eyes landing on the figure hovering outside. Superman. He pressed a button on the desk. The window slid open. Superman stepped inside slowly, surveying the office before focusing on the seated man. "Thank you," Superman said quietly, "for stopping Darkseid, for saving Earth." Ashborne didn't meet his gaze. "This is my planet and home as much as it is yours. What do you really want?" Superman hesitated, then asked, "Why did you go after Lex Luthor? What did you do to him?" Ashborne's reply came without hesitation. "Do the details matter? Lex is dead, that's the end of it." Superman's jaw tightened. "I just want to understand what's going on. The things you've done over the years. The words that red-haired man said, none of it makes sense. Ashborne, what side are you on, really?" At that, Ashborne slowly looked up. His eyes looked dim and exhausted. "I'm just someone who's bored," he said, "and tired of fighting, of killing. I see no purpose or joy in it." Lex Luthor wasn't just Lex anymore. Years ago, when Brainiac attacked and blasted him in that lab, he didn't just fail the killing attempt. He left a copy of himself, his code inside Luthor. Superman's eyes narrowed slightly. "By the time you reached him," Ashborne continued, "it was already too late. Brainiac could have taken full control and wiped out your little band of heroes in a heartbeat. Even if you had defeated Lex, he would have eventually joined with Gorilla Grodd and the Legion of Doom to bring back Darkseid through their own twisted means. And Earth would have been invaded," Superman said, slowly putting it together. "More than invaded," Ashborne nodded. "Devastated. And in that whole sick play, both Lex and Brainiac would die. So I took the liberty of ending that possibility early. I changed the board." He let out a hollow chuckle. "Funny thing is, even after all that, the world was still invaded. Another avatar of Darkseid, from another reality." Superman was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that had haunted him. "Why did you try to kill me?" Ashborne tilted his head slightly. "I didn't. I ordered Baru to bring Lex, and I told him not to kill anyone. He figured the fastest way to complete the mission and impress me was to put a hole through you while avoiding all vital organs." Superman placed a hand to his temple and sighed, deeply frustrated. "Why didn't you explain that? Why not come clean and avoid all the conflict?" Ashborne finally stood, walking to the window. His gaze swept across the skyline. "Because if I did, you'd grow complacent. Knowing I'm around to stop what you can't, to clean up every mess. But the threat of shadows, of something you can't fully understand, that keeps you sharp, on edge. It makes you do better. It ensures I don't have to fight personally." Superman was quiet for a long moment. "Courtney reaching your home to ask Ace and Emizo to stop you, that was staged, wasn't it?" Ashborne nodded. "I teleported her just close enough for my play to complete. You needed to continue believing something dangerous and unknown is lurking while staying away from me, and you did." Superman walked toward the window. He paused before stepping out. "We'll do our best, so you won't have to step in again." Ashborne didn't reply. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden rays over the quiet park. Ace and Courtney stood beneath an old oak when Ace broke the silence. "So, why the park?" she asked, glancing around. "It's kinda random." Courtney rubbed her arm nervously. "I wanted to check on you, after everything. But visiting your house?" She shook her head. "Not ideal." Ace gave her a knowing smirk. "You're afraid of Dad, aren't you?" Courtney laughed, though there was little humor in it. She nodded. "After what we saw, I'd be insane not to be." Ace looked away, sighing. "He wouldn't hurt you, you know." "I believe you when you say that," Courtney replied, stepping closer. "But after seeing what he did, how strong he really is, what he is, I'll never forget that." "You talk like he's not human." "Because I'm not sure anymore, Ace," Courtney said. "What we saw wasn't human. It wasn't alien either. He controlled the dead." Ace lowered herself onto a nearby bench. "Sit," she said quietly. Courtney joined her. Ace stared at the ground for a long moment before speaking again. "I told you before about what happened years ago when he saved me. I saw through his memories back then. Do you remember?" Courtney nodded silently. "I didn't see everything," Ace continued, but I saw enough to understand. To avoid confusion, Ace will be hiding the existence of the system from her story, and she will be filling parts based on her understanding. She doesn't know Ashborne is not from DC originally, and he knew the story of DC. Also a reminder, the story of Ashborne doesn't follow the original Solo Leveling 100%. This is a mix of truth and gaslighting. She looked ahead, voice steady, but almost distant. When he was younger, much younger, he was taken, dragged by some powerful being to a different world against his will. The creator of that world forged beings of light, godlike and absolute, called the rulers. They were meant to preserve the world, to guide it, to balance it. Ace looked over at her, her voice barely more than a whisper. Dad was the first of them, the ruler of death. Courtney sat still listening. But the creator didn't stop there, Ace went on. It also created another side. Beings just as powerful, but full of rage. Destruction, ambition, the monarchs, opposite forces. Like night and day, creation and destruction. She paused. The creator wanted balance, not peace. As mortals rose, as the world changed, that balance had to be tested, refined. The rulers and the monarchs fought each other in an eternal war, for an eternity. But neither side ever won. That was the point. Courtney spoke at last, her voice hesitant. But how did your dad become a monarch if he was created to be a ruler? Ace closed her eyes for a moment. Because the rulers betrayed everything they stood for, they grew tired of the war, tired of their purpose. So they turned on their own creator, killed it, took its remaining power for themselves. Courtney gasped softly. Ace's eyes narrowed. Dad didn't approve of their actions. He tried to stop them, but failed. She turned her gaze back toward the horizon, where the last bit of sun was dipping below the skyline. After the rulers stole the creator's power, they became stronger than the monarchs. The war shifted. The balance tilted. So Dad, he turned against the rulers, joined the monarchs, and became the shadow monarch. He gave them a fighting chance. Courtney whispered, and that worked? Oz nodded. Yeah, Dad was the greatest fragment of brilliant light and the strongest of the rulers. With his help, the monarchs started winning. They began to dominate. The scales tipped again. So, he left them too. Created a third faction, his own. He fought both sides after that, because he had to protect the balance. That was his binding, his quest. Ace's voice was low but firm. Dad hated the war. Hated the endless fighting. After he turned against both factions, he tried something else. He preached peace. He asked them to stop, to see what they'd become. But none of them cared. Not the rulers, not the monarchs. Each side wanted only one thing, to destroy the other, and they wouldn't stop until that happened. Courtney listened, unmoving, as Ace's gaze dropped. He kept trying anyway, Ace went on, kept fighting only to prevent the scales from tipping too far to either side. But that only made them hate him more, both sides. To them, he was a traitor, a problem, an obstacle standing in the way of absolute victory. She took a slow breath. As both factions lost more and more warriors, Dad's army grew. Shadows, the dead. Their power lived on through him. That only deepened their hatred. So they did the one thing no one expected. They joined hands, monarchs and rulers. United. Not to end the war, but to destroy Dad first, then go back to slaughtering each other. Courtney's breath caught. He tried to stop them, Ace said. Tried to reach them with words one last time. Begged them to see reason. But they were blinded. Drunk on destruction. He had no choice. She looked away, voice thick with restrained emotion. He killed them. All of them. Every monarch. Every ruler. They refused to back down to the very end. Courtney whispered, Then he came back to Earth? To live here? Ace shook her head slowly. No, not then. Right after that, another force came, the Atarim, beings like the one who created the rulers and monarchs. Ancient, hungry, and more powerful than either side had ever faced. They wanted to devour the world that no longer had a master. She paused. Dad was the only thing left. The last force that could stand against them, so he did. Another war began, more brutal than the first. No sides this time, just survival. Courtney opened her mouth, then closed it again, overwhelmed. Ace nodded, reading her. He needed help. Even he couldn't stand alone against them forever. So, he brought the rulers and monarchs back. Courtney's eyes widened. He couldn't turn them into shadows against their will, Ace continued. So we made a pact. In exchange for their help, he wouldn't erase them again. They'd live in his shadow for all eternity, with some degree of freedom bound to him, but not erased. They agreed, and the war, it escalated into something unimaginable. Her voice lowered. Yuatarin fell one by one over the centuries, but the final battle, it ended everything. The last breath, the last life in that world was snuffed out. He won the war, but there was nothing left. The balance was restored, not by peace, but by emptiness. For a moment, only the wind spoke. Ace finally looked at Courtney. That's when he came here, to our world. I think he returned to the moment he was taken away all those years ago. Same body, still young, but with everything. His power, his army, his memories. Courtney stared at her, stunned. Ace's voice softened. He won't hurt without a reason. I know what you saw was terrifying, but you have to understand. He tried to have peace with beings who wanted to kill him for eternity. He did everything he could to end the bloodshed. She stood, looking down at Courtney. That's why I said we're similar, but his life was so much worse. My choices were taken. My childhood was stolen with endless tests and experiments. He was the same, but instead was thrown into endless war, defending a place he didn't belong to. The last light of day faded, casting the park into twilight. Courtney hadn't known what to expect when she asked Ace to meet her in the park. A simple check, maybe some closure after everything they'd seen. But the story she got, the truth about Ashborne, was far from simple. It shattered every assumption she had. The terrifying shadow that towered over the battlefield, deathless and cold, now stood in her mind as something entirely different. He had been a child once, taken, forced into war, betrayed, hated, used. The story didn't make him any less powerful, any less frightening, but it made him human. Somehow that made it worse. She didn't keep the story to herself. Within days, she had shared it with the other heroes. Quietly at first, only those close to her, but word spread. Soon, every member of the Justice League knew. Even those who hadn't interacted with Ashborne in person now spoke of him. No longer with simple fear, but with conflicted awe. When Superman heard the story, he sat silently for a long time. The memory of his last conversation with Ashborne surfaced, brief, cold, and cryptic. But now it all made sense. Every word, every action, every distant look in the man's eyes. This explains everything, Clark said at last, voice low, almost reverent. Not everyone shared that sentiment. When Batman learned the full scope of what had been revealed, his reaction was colder. He didn't pity Ashborne. He didn't feel grateful. No, Bruce Wayne only grew more frustrated. The pieces fit too well. He believed more than ever the 3 incidents with Ashborne and Joker was Ashborne's handiwork, but he kept it to himself. It wasn't the time. Confrontation would bring nothing, and even if it did, what could he do? Ashborne wasn't just strong, he was beyond them all. A being who had defeated gods and monsters and stood alone when an entire universe was destroyed. So Bruce said nothing. He filed the truth away in his mind and let the world keep its peace. Far from the League's talks, within the Black Villa, Ashborne stood before his daughter. I keep hearing about my story, he said flatly. Every time I check with my shadows, another version, another whisper. Why? Ace shrugged, because everyone's afraid of you. Ashborne said nothing. So I figured, maybe it'd help if they knew you're not the great monster they think you are. I did omit a few details and the ending. She shrugged. You're still terrifying, and they would avoid angering you, but at least now they know who you are. A flicker of something passed through his eyes. Perhaps amusement. Perhaps exasperation. He shook his head and turned away. A month had passed since the invasion. The scars of Darkseid's assaults still lingered across the world. People were recovering from their losses. And in a dimly lit lab in one of the research facilities owned by Shadow Corp, Gizmo hadn't moved from his workspace. Ashborne stood at the entrance silent. The glow of monitors and welding sparks danced across his face as he observed the small, brilliant inventor hunched over his latest project. Gizmo looked exhausted, eyes red-rimmed, his movements mechanical. You haven't left your lab since the invasion, Ashborne finally said. Gizmo didn't look back. I have work to do. Ashborne stepped inside. His voice was steady. Low. Are you angry with me for not being there? For the first time, Gizmo paused. He set down the tool in his hand and turned just enough to glance over his shoulder. His expression was tired, not bitter. I'm not. If you hadn't come back in time, I'd be dead too. There was no accusation in his tone, just a quiet truth. Gizmo lowered his gaze, staring at the half-assembled armor sprawled across his table. I'm angry at myself for not being prepared enough. I watched Jinx and Kaid get killed, and I couldn't do anything to help them. His voice tightened, jaw clenched. I'm building a new variant of the arm guard, but this one, it's for the entire body. I won't watch my friends die again. Ashborne stood silent for a moment, then nodded. Take some rest, he said. I've spread my army across the globe. If this happens again, if so much as a portal opens on Earth, I'll know. This won't happen again on my watch. Without waiting for a reply, Ashborne turned and left the lab. Behind him, Gizmo muttered under his breath, if only you did that earlier. Ashborne didn't stop. Over the following days, he moved from one place to another, visiting his acquaintances, those who had stood against Darkseid, those who had barely made it out alive. He had given them 2 weeks. Time to mourn, time to reflect, and now he came to see them as a friend. Jinx and Kaid were gone, nothing would change that, but the others had survived, and to each of them, Ashborne offered what little peace he could provide, his presence, his promise, even the Joker. In the depths of Gotham's underworld, Ashborne found the clown prince of crime in a derelict theater, ranting to mannequins and laughing at ghosts. The moment he saw Ashborne, Joker's grin twisted with annoyance. You know, Joker said, arms outstretched like an offended showman, it's not fair. A god playing in my sandbox. That's just mean. Like a cruel joke, but no one's laughing. And worst of all, he pointed accusingly, I know now Batman was your victim. It was not a coincidence. You played the joke, and you used me and Harley to make Batman into the punchline. Ashborne laughed. A deep, amused rumble from someone who hadn't laughed in a long time. Then, without a word, he vanished into the shadows. Joker stared at the empty space, scowling. Rude? And somewhere, in the silence that followed, the world continued to heal. In the endless dark of the Shadow Realm, where the weight of existence trembled under the might of shadows, the White Palace stood tall. Gleaming like bone in moonlight, it defied the black sea of the Shadow Realm that surrounded. Ashborne stepped through the veil of shadows and entered the White Palace, his presence melting into the silence like a returning storm. Within, Antares awaited. The monarch of destruction reclined lazily atop a throne forged of shattered worlds, fragments of dead dimensions still echoing faintly around his seat. His appearance was regal, yet unnerving, his aura a blend of destructive power and ancient wrath. Ashborne raised a brow, seeing him on the throne. A grin curled across Antares' face the moment he saw Ashborne and stood up. Got tired of standing and took some rest. Anyway, thanks to you, he said, voice rich with dark amusement. I got to enjoy destroying so much. Ashborne stepped closer, the shadows parting around his form. Darkseid? Antares' grin only widened. I slaughtered him across every dimension, he said, his tone casual, as if recounting a mildly interesting vacation. And when I went to the God Sphere, I found the other gods already in a panic. With the help of some beings called the Endless, they expelled him. Seems they didn't want the destruction of everything, and one of them said she is a friend of yours. Dee, I believe was her name. Ashborne nodded slowly. The outcome wasn't unexpected with the presence missing, but the speed of it perhaps was. Ashborne assumed Dee had helped. She knew the consequences of a full-blown war. Antares stood, his red hair sweeping behind him like the wake of a blood tide. It's a pity, he said with a shrug. They gave him to me so easily. But anyway, he walked forward, his crimson eyes gleaming. Remember to call me if you need to do something like that again. I'd be more than happy to help you commit genocides and bring everything to ashes. Without waiting for a reply, Antares turned and walked toward a red gate that pulsed with raw, destructive power. It opened for him like a hungry maw, and with one final smirk he vanished into it, leaving nothing behind. Ashborne stared at the space where the gate had closed. That was a lot faster than I expected, he muttered. Turning away from the throne in the now silent palace, Ashborne departed the Shadow Realm once more. Ashborne, still processing everything, rubbed his temples. Of all the things he expected to walk into today, this was not on the list. In the end, he let out a long breath and shook his head with a chuckle. This is the most confusing and random thing I have seen in a while. And you were angry when I said you are kinky. T ignored him. He turned and closed the door behind him. But what gentleman would refuse such a tempting offer? Ashborne walked toward the two. Kara looked panicked while Galatea continued to playfully hold and play with Kara's body. Ashborne and Galatea gave Kara the best first-time experience she could have asked for. 2 months had passed since the war that shook the earth to its core. Though scars remained, life moved forward. People returned to their routines, living the life while holding on to the memories of the fallen. Cities erected statues, engraved names, and held silent vigils. Among the many memorials, one stood quietly but prominently before the towering Shadow Court building, an obsidian pillar made of unknown material with a single name etched in white ivory material. Rex, Ashborne, had made sure of it. Rex's memory and sacrifice would not be forgotten. Elsewhere, the world had gotten used to some of the strange after-effects of the war. One of the most talked about was the unexpected yet very public relationship between Kara, Galatea, and Ashborne. Rumors came and went, but the three made no attempt to hide it. They didn't need to. Kara, once focused on the heroism, was now smiling again, laughing without a cape. Superman, however, found the situation complicated. Inappropriate was one word he'd used in private. But every time he saw his cousin genuinely happy, happier than she'd been in years, his objections dissolved into silence. He could not deny it. This new relationship gave her something he hadn't seen in a long time. Joy. Still, it troubled him. In his mind, any conflict that might arise would be Ashborne's fault. Kara was passionate, yes, but Ashborne was a being of unfathomable power and a history that stretched across dimensions and wars. If Kara ever got hurt, who could stop him? Who could even talk sense into him? Why couldn't she have picked someone normal? Clark wondered one evening. Someone I could punch if needed? Meanwhile, Ashborne made preparations of his own. Remnant has an unfinished quest. They had left it abruptly, before Amazo could ask Penny to officially be his girlfriend. This time, Ashborne didn't plan to return alone. The ones accompanying him included Ace, Galatea, Kara, and Courtney, the latter eager to see a new world and determined not to let Ace travel without her. Ashborne welcomed the company, but it raised a pressing issue. Who would oversee Shadow Corp in his absence? After careful deliberation, he made a choice that would stun the world. Vandal Savage, a villain to some, a visionary to others, he had lived across ages and ruled from behind the curtains of empires, but most importantly, he was competent. When Vandal raised an eyebrow and asked, "Why me?" Ashborne's answer was calm, but laced with meaning. You became my friend 75,000 years in the future, and you owe me a favor, one you can't walk out on. If you refuse me, or don't do a good job, I will be sad. And you don't want me to be sad. The subtle smile that followed was far more terrifying than any threat. The Vandal agreed, not out of this supposed friendship, not even for the said favor, but because he knew, more than anyone else, that upsetting a god of death and darkness was a shortcut to an eternity of suffering. When the news broke, both the Justice League and world authorities turned a blind eye. They had a new motto now: whatever Ashborne does, it has nothing to do with us. The sun dipped low over Beacon Academy, casting golden streaks across the stone-paved courtyard. Students were wrapping up for the day, chatting, stretching, and laughing until a sudden gust of wind blew through the yard, followed by a blinding swirl of violet light. From the heart of the courtyard, a purple gate snapped open, sending a shockwave of awe through the crowd. Heads turned, conversation stopped, and weapons instinctively inched toward hands, until figures stepped out of the portal. Two of them were familiar faces, Ashborne and Amazo, the mysterious powerhouses who had vanished without a trace. But the four women with them were strangers, and judging by their poise, definitely not ordinary travelers. The moment of stunned silence ended as a storm of red petals danced through the air, materializing into none other than Ruby Rose. She raced toward them with a gleam of relief in her eyes. "Ashborne! Amazo! You're back!" Ruby cried. "Where have you been? It has been almost a year. You scared us when you disappeared like that." Ashborne nodded in greeting. There were unfortunate events back home we had to deal with. Behind him, Courtney muttered under her breath, "That's an understatement." Ruby glanced at her. then at the others curiously. Her eyes locked on one familiar face, Ashbourne's girlfriend, and then widened in confusion as she noticed another who looked just like a carbon copy. Ashbourne noticed her stare and decided to put things plainly. "Let me introduce everyone properly," he said, gesturing with calm confidence. "This is T and Kara, my girlfriends. That's Ace, my daughter. And this is Courtney, Ace's best friend." Then he motioned toward Ruby. "And this is Ruby Rose, a native of this world." Ruby blinked. "Native to this world?" Ashbourne gave a light chuckle, but didn't linger on the question. "I need to find Osmond or someone to arrange rooms for us. We'll talk later." Ruby nodded. "Right? I'll let the others know you're back." With that, Ashbourne vanished, teleporting directly to the headmaster's office, where Glinda Goodwitch was in conversation with Professor Ozpin. Both turned sharply at his sudden appearance. Ozpin recovered first with a weak smile. "Mr. Black, you're back, and you have more company this time." Ashbourne smirked faintly. "You don't sound too thrilled." Ozpin's polite tone didn't waver. "Of course not. You are always welcome here." "Happy to hear that," Ashbourne replied. "I'll need 3 rooms prepared for my companions." Ozpin turned to Glinda. "Please see to it." Glinda sighed. "Very well." Courtney raised an eyebrow. "They know and fear him, don't they?" "Why am I not surprised?" Ace laughed, while the others shared amused expressions. Glinda and Ozpin, for their part, kept composed and wisely ignored the jab. Ozpin cleared his throat. "By the way, we've had guests at Beacon waiting for you for nearly a year now. Roman and his sidekick." Ashbourne blinked. "I forgot about the guy. Where is he?" "In your old room," Ozpin answered simply. Ashbourne nodded. Beside him, Kara tilted her head. "Who's Roman?" "A nice and funny guy I met here," Ashbourne replied casually. Roseanne's eye twitched, just for a moment, but Kara caught it immediately. "He's a known criminal, isn't he?" she asked, half amused. "An ex-crime lord, actually, and was a part-time terrorist planning to destroy the kingdom for a while," Ashbourne replied with a straight face. Courtney sighed. "Again, I'm not surprised." The hallway leading to the dorms was quiet, with only the faint murmur of students in the distance. Ashbourne walked alone, his footsteps silent as he approached a familiar door, his old room, currently occupied by 2 individuals most would rather forget. He opened the door without knocking. Inside, Roman Torchwick was lounging in a chair, hat tipped slightly forward, while Neo lay stretched across the bed like she owned it. The moment Roman saw him, he grinned. "Well, well," Roman drawled. "Our boss man finally decided to visit these 2 lowly criminals. I was beginning to think you forgot about us." Ashbourne tilted his head slightly. "I actually did forget about you 2. Unexpected things happened. I had to go back home quickly." Roman raised an amused brow. "And what, pray tell, is so important that it made you forget 2 fine criminals and faithful followers under your supervision and waiting for you for so long?" Ashbourne stepped inside, voice calm. "The god of tyranny attacked my home world and nearly destroyed it. I went back and slaved his army, then killed him gruesomely, fixed the damage done to the world, then sent my army to end the god across all dimensions before ending his existence in the god sphere. I also had some acquaintances to visit and side chores to complete, adding the time dilation between worlds. It took me some time to finish all of that." Roman blinked slowly. "You were too busy." "Got it." Ashbourne chuckled. "Now tell me, why are you 2 here?" Roman shrugged, folding his hands behind his head. "Well, you told us not to commit crimes, but we still needed food. And moving around as 2 very known criminals is kind of hard, you know. So we gambled on coming here. If the good guys here know what's good for them, they'd let us stay comfortably and feed us while waiting for you. And if they didn't, well, then you'd come break us out and teach them a lesson to not mess with your faithful minions." Roman grinned. "Hearing what you have done on the other side, I think it's a pity they didn't try locking us up." Ashbourne let out an amused laugh. "Not bad thinking." He glanced around the room briefly before continuing. "I'm going to stay here for a while. My son's going to ask Penny Polandina to be his girlfriend. Then we'll return to my homeworld." Roman gave an approving nod. "Sounds good to me." On the bed, Neo remained sprawled out, silent as ever, her expression unreadable. She didn't so much as glance their way, content with simply existing in the background, unconcerned with the world around her. Ashbourne stood in the doorway a moment longer, then gave a simple nod and turned to leave, leaving the 2 criminals to their peace for now. When Ruby got word of Ashbourne and Amaza's return and the fact they weren't alone, she wasted no time informing the rest of her team. They brought people with them, she told the others as they gathered in the common room. One of them is Ashborne's daughter, and the others, well, I figured you'd want to see for yourselves. Naturally, curiosity got the better of them. Team RWEY made their way to the meeting point, a quiet rooftop that overlooked the city's glowing skyline. And there they saw them, a small group standing with a relaxed familiarity. Amazo stood in his Ashborne-like look, his presence muted, but undeniable. Beside him was a girl, about their age, slim, sharp-eyed, with a strange stillness in her stance that had to be Ashborne's daughter. Next to her was another teen with warm features and a gentle smile, clearly a close friend. But it wasn't them that caught their attention. It was the other two. Two women stood side by side, both tall, blonde, and stunning. They were nearly identical, only their clothing set them apart. It wasn't long after that they learned the two women were both Ashborne's girlfriends. Yang blinked. Wait, you're both dating him? The women turned, seemingly unfazed. Yep, Kara said with a confident grin. We're his girlfriends. Galatea nodded beside her, arms crossed. We are. Yang raised a hand in disbelief. Hold up, you two are sisters? And you're dating the same guy? And you're okay with that? Galatea cracked a slight smirk. We're not sisters, Kara added. Tease my clone. They made the air stand still. Blake tilted her head. Your clone? Yang's brow furrowed. Okay, now I'm really confused. Galatea sighed, brushing her blonde hair back. Some group of mad scientists took Kara's DNA a few years ago and made me in a lab. No consent, of course. And you wouldn't believe how expensive the whole process was. Blake narrowed her eyes. Who would even allow something like that? And who would pay for something so messed up? Kara glanced to the side. A very paranoid organization. And well, Ashborne helped fund the project. Wise's eyes widened in disbelief. He paid to have his girlfriend cloned? Kara quickly shook her head. No, he didn't know I was being cloned. He thought he was funding a meta-defense project. By the time he suspected something was on, T already existed. T jumped in, voice more amused than bitter. And she wasn't his girlfriend back then. After some stuff happened and the cloning lab fell apart, I shamelessly demanded Ashborne to take responsibility for my existence, as I had nowhere else to go. She shrugged. He did. Took me in, gave me a job. Later, we got together. Kara joined the fun after that. The silence that followed was deafening. Team RWBE stood frozen in place, completely overwhelmed by everything they had just heard. Ruby was the first to speak, voice dazed. That's a lot. It sounds like a crazy soap opera. From the side, Courtney, who had been quietly observing with arms folded, finally spoke up. It's all true, as absurd as it sounds. There's nothing normal about this family, she explained. The father is a death and darkness god in all but name. The mothers are from a superpowered alien race. One is a clone. The son's a sentient, god-killing android. The daughter's a metahuman with basilisk eyes and reality-warping abilities. Silence again. Team RW boy just stared, wide-eyed and speechless. They don't know we're aliens to this world, Amazo commented. No one had a single thing to say. Ashborne watched the four huntresses with an amused gleam in his eyes. Team RWBY had gathered around him. Their expressions a mixture of frustration, curiosity, and shock. You mean to tell us, Weiss started, arms crossed, that you and Amazo aren't even from this world? You're aliens, Ruby blurted out. To think you're both so powerful, Blake murmured, and you're not native to Remnant. Not just powerful, Weiss added. Ashborne's practically a god in his world. Ashborne simply raised a brow, clearly enjoying the chaos his reveal had caused. He looked directly at Ruby, his smirk widening. Ruby, you remember you sold your soul to me for 10 years, right? Her face turned ghost white. What? In the presence of a god, Ashborne said, voice deliberately grave, you can't go back on your word. Yang instinctively stepped between them, hand on her hip. That was just for cookies. Ashborne grinned, eyes glowing faintly. Exactly. I want her to make me cookies. All day, every day, for the next 10 years. The air went dead silent. Yag opened her mouth, then closed it again. Weiss and Blake exchanged a glance, equally speechless. Ashborne finally let out a soft chuckle. Relax, I'm only joking. You all looked like I'd sentenced her to a lifetime of servitude. Ruby exhaled loudly, sagging in relief. Not funny. Very funny, he corrected her with a smile. Then her curiosity got the better of her. But seriously, why did you come to Remnant? Why stay here? Ashborne leaned back slightly. Emizo became interested in something foreign to him, love. He wanted to find a girlfriend. Naturally, we didn't want to raise a girlfriend. Morally questionable. So we searched for one in the wild. Yang blinked. You make it sound like you were on a safari. Or search, Ashborne continued, undeterred, led us to your world, and we found Penny. Amazo took a liking to her. I liked her too. She had that sparkle. Kara, lounging next to Ashborne with her chin in her hand, sighed. No need to be surprised. Over the years, Ashborne's done many stupid and unreasonable things. He raised a brow. I didn't. She ignored him. Adopting Amazo was one of them. The android was on a rampage at the time, flattening entire teams of heroes. Ruby blinked. Wait, Amazo was really a killer robot? Not that far, but he was not friendly, and Ashborne didn't even fight Amazo, Kara said flatly. Just talked him into an adoption plan out of the blue. Somehow that worked. There was a pause. Then Blake looked around. Speaking of, where is Amazo? Haven't seen him in a while. He went to Atlas, Ashborne replied casually, to ask Penny to be his girlfriend. Rice gasped. But General Ironwood won't allow that. There's no way. Ashborne just smiled, slow and confident. He'll allow it. He has to consider the survival of his kingdom before making that kind of decision. Weiss looked horrified. Wait. Are you saying you'll destroy Atlas if he says no? Of course not. I'm a civilized, good-natured citizen from a friendly neighboring world, Ashborne said, waving it off. That's his way of thinking. He leaned forward slightly, voice low and ominously amused. Personally, I believe, where there is a slap, there is a way. That line froze the air. The girls exchanged horrified looks, collectively remembering the White Fang slap incident during the Vidal Festival, a moment none of them would forget. And now they imagined the same thing. General Ironwood. In public, getting slapped. Ruby and Blake paled. Yang muttered, poor guy. Weiss whispered, he doesn't stand a chance. And they all collectively felt a deep, unfamiliar fear, not for themselves, but for the General of Atlas. That night, as the stars blanketed the skies of Remnant, a sleek ripple of light shimmered outside Beacon Academy. Moments later, Amazo stepped in, Beacon with Penny beside him, her face beaming brighter than ever. The two walked to Amazo's group rooms, and the moment Amazo entered, she said yes, Amazo announced flatly, but there was something different in his voice. An edge of pride, maybe even excitement. Penny giggled, holding onto his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. I did. I said yes. Ashborne observed it all with a faint smirk as the others congratulated Amazo. He stepped forward after everyone and placed his hand on Amazo's shoulder with a proud look. In Ashborne's eyes, his unlikely child had grown now. Exactly as Ashborne had expected, General Ironwood feared that refusing the match might bring Ashborne's wrath crashing down upon Atlas, and so the general wisely kept his silence when Amazo asked Penny to be his girlfriend. Penny twirled once in place, waving to Team WBI as they came running out. Penny, Ruby shouted, hugging her tight. Yang grinned. So, it's official now. Penny nodded happily. Yes, I have a boyfriend. And he's amazing and shiny and strong and logical and so smart, and he got me flowers when he asked me. Introductions followed soon after. Amazo, with his mechanical precision, introduced Penny to each member of their unusual group. This is Kara, Galatea, Courtney, Ace, and you already know, Father, he said. The group's reaction to Penny was unanimous. Unfiltered amusement. She's like a puppy that got turned into a person, Kara muttered, smirking. She's adorable, Ace added with a tilt of her head. An innocent ball of pure joy and excitement, Galatea concluded. Penny just smiled at all of them. Thank you. Over the next few days, the group extended their stay in Remnant, choosing to explore the Four Kingdoms. From the flying city of Atlas to the cultural richness of Mistro, the group moved together, sometimes walking, sometimes flying, sometimes teleporting, causing ripples of curiosity, awe, and mild chaos wherever they passed. Roman and Neo, having nothing to do, tagged along, sometimes disappearing, and reappearing with armfuls of local snacks or mysterious souvenirs. Roman and Neo just smirked, enjoying everything. Finally, the day came to leave. They gathered on Beacon's cliff that overlooks Vale. "We'll be going now," Ashborne said calmly. Ruby, Blake, Yang, and Wise stood close, saying their goodbyes. Penny hugged Ruby tightly one more time before turning and walking through the portal beside Amazo. Roman and Neo gave a casual wave, Roman muttering he will actually miss Little Red. And just like that, they were gone. The portal closed, leaving only the breeze and the sound of distant birds in its wake. Team RWBY stood silently for a moment. "Did that really happen?" Blake asked. Yang crossed her arms. "That group is like a fever dream." Ruby smiled softly, but it was a good one. Weiss exhaled. "Let's just hope General Ironwood doesn't get slapped in the future." Years like falling leaves drifted swiftly by. The world changed, heroes passed, villains vanished, but Ashborne remained, watching the ever-growing branches of his legacy. In time, he officially married both Kara and Galatea, in a ceremony that defied convention and celebrated unity. It was a quiet affair by all standards. Only those who truly mattered were invited. From Kara, he was blessed with a daughter. From Galatea, a son. The boy, bold and sharp-eyed like his mother, was named Rex. Kara stepped away from the world of heroism once motherhood arrived. She found joy not in battle but in soft mornings, warm kitchens, and tiny feet running through the halls of their vast home. She gave herself wholly to her children, and to Ashborne, content in a peace she had never known. Ace and Courtney, once best friends, eventually found themselves entwined in something deeper. The bond they shared matured over the years until love was simply the natural result. They began dating openly, their deep friendship forming a strong foundation. Meanwhile, Amazo, the symbol of human ingenuity, evolved once again. He modified both himself and Penny with astounding advancements, granting them the ability to conceive and reproduce like humans. It was something only someone like Amazo could do, and Ashborne, recognizing the enormity of what it meant, personally named the dowry for Penny's hand, the eradication of all Grimm from Remnant. Ashborne fulfilled the promise himself on the wedding day. He hunted down the Grimm across every corner of Remnant, uprooted the influence of the two gods who birthed them, and ended their endless war once and for all. When he found the brother gods, he didn't argue, negotiate, or bargain. He simply looked at them, and that alone was enough. His voice, calm but immovable, declared Remnant under his protection. The gods who once shaped worlds with ease trembled in his presence. They dared not return. Roman, ever the cunning survivor, found a place for himself too. With Ashborne's approval, he was named Vice CEO of Shadow Corp, a great cooperation that expanded to other planets and even Remnant. His history as a crime lord gave him a unique skill set to manage and negotiate. Neo, fierce and faithful, officially became his wife in a ceremony witnessed by their closest companions, and with Ashborne's blessing, her greatest wish was granted. She spoke for the first time in her life, her voice clear, quiet, and full of wonder. In time, the lines between hero and villain blurred when it came to Ashborne. All knew him, respected him, feared him. The greatest villains and heroes alike didn't dare to cause trouble around him, both only kept their distance. Yet Ashborne kept no one at bay. He maintained connections across every walk of life. Victor and his wife visited regularly, enjoying philosophical debates about life and ice cream in equal measure. Harley Quinn and her crew would crash family events with chaos and cupcakes. Gizmo and his friends were constant presences, as much a part of the household as anyone. Family events became legendary. Ashborne, ever the playful host, always sent invitations to both Joker and Batman. Each knew the other was invited. Each time, they declined. But the Joker, despite not showing up, sent gifts instead. Fine, jewel-encrusted, personalized daggers. It became a running joke in the house. Joker sent another tribute, Galatea would say, grinning. He must really not want to be visited, Ace would reply with a smirk. Still, Ashborne never stopped, and the daggers continued to stack in a dedicated drawer labeled Joker's offerings. And then, one day, something alien came to Earth. The Preserver arrived, a being who moved between galaxies, who chronicled the rise and fall of civilizations and protected species from extinction. He came not for his job, but as a visitor. Ashborne welcomed him warmly. "This," he said proudly, gesturing to his children, "is my legacy." The Preserver looked upon Rex and his sister, children born of divine, cloned, and Cropitonian lines, made his eyes widen. "A new race," the Preserver whispered. "One born from convergence love will..." He turned to Ashborne with rare reverence. If ever you need help protecting them, I shall bring you every technology and every shield the cosmos has to offer. Ashborne laughed, a deep, resonant sound. I appreciate the offer, my friend, but they will not need protection. They have me. And in that laughter echoed a truth, not of fear or war, but of peace and absolute power. Ashborne, the ruler of death who walked among mortals, the shadow monarch who became a father, had created a home and enjoyed what life had to offer,